Hello, MIFV Max, and later on, the kaiju lovers. This is MIFV's, the start, I should say, of MIFV's coverage week to week, episode by episode of Monarch's Legacy of Monsters Season 2. I did this for the previous season. I'm doing it again. Yeah, sure, Jimmy. Yeah, you can come along for this one. All right. So we had the first episode. I just got out of the screening room watching it. So this will be, I shall back this up for those who may not know, if you're new patrons. I will be doing episode by episode coverage of Monarch, and they will be exclusive to Patreon until the end of the season. And after a week or two of all of it being exclusive, I will be putting them out in compilations for the regular podcast feed. So you're getting my exclusive immediate thoughts for the time being. So our first episode is called Cause and Effect, directed by Lawrence Tilling. And if Wikipedia is anything to go off of, let's see. He's a TV director, producer, and a writer, apparently. Directed nearly 150 hours of television. Ooh. And his past credits include Felicity, Alias, that makes sense, Parenthood, Pushing Daisies, Goliath. I don't even know what Goliath is. Oh, it's a legal drama. Okay. And Outer Range? Science fiction Western. I guess that makes sense. I don't know that one. And he's directed episodes of Scrubs, Monk, Masters of Sex. Oh boy. Was it Damages? Don't know that one. Another legal thriller. Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Snowfall. So he's well experienced, and he has done some action and sci-fi before, but it looks like he has a lot of comedy in there too, which is interesting. So he's got a pretty broad skill set there. And our screenwriter is Chris Black, who, if I remember correctly, him and Matt Fraction are the co-creators of Monarch Legacy of Monsters. So that's usually a pretty good way to start things off here. And let me see, looks like we have the same team of writers who are going to be working on the rest of the season, going off of the Wikipedia page here. Hopefully the one I didn't like in the last season, the notorious Mariko Tamaki, hopefully she can keep her ridiculousness out of the way, preferably. And the last, let's see, that's good. Now I know how long I'm going to be doing this. So let's see, March, April, and probably May. So I'm going to be subscribed to Apple TV Plus for the sake of the show, because for 3 months, and probably no longer than that because the board doesn't give me enough money to do this crap. Yeah, I am going to complain about that because what are they going to do about it at this point? Let's just say I have protection. All right. So let's get into our first episode here. Well, actually, might end up being like February. It might be 4 months. Oh, well, I guess I'll just beg for more money. So we have a ton of returning cast members with this one. Basically, everybody from last season is here again. I won't bother with a plot synopsis. You probably already know. What's going on. This is basically styled like an after show. Let me see. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something here because they were talking about a character. Yeah, Verdugo. Let's see. Show Kong is still behaving aggressively. So I guess I missed the part where Verdugo died. Whatever. So I'm just gonna go through my notes in order of the episode, and no surprise to any of you, I took about 2 pages of notes. Yeah, I know. It's me we're talking about here. So it's following the same format that we did before, where we have stuff in the present day and we cut back to flashbacks. And as I said, with season 1, the flashbacks were by far the more interesting of the two. The weird thing is that I think the writers got the memo, and now the present day stuff has really picked up. it is a lot better. Just in this first episode, it's already a lot better than most of last season, which I'm very appreciative. And the flashbacks in this episode go back to 1957, and I'm wondering if they're going to stay there for a while. It certainly looks like they're going to be there the next episode. And so that means it's set in the middle of the season 1 flashbacks. So it's filling in a little bit of a gap we have here. So just to be fair, when the recap started up, that, gave me a recap in about 5 minutes of last season, I let it play because it has been a while since I've watched it. And interestingly, Godzilla is featured very prominently. And the joke I would normally make is, they basically took all of his screen time and put it into that. Sorry, not sorry, but that was a thing last season. Yeah. But it was, like I said, it was much appreciated, so I remembered all the important things. So recaps are still important even in this age of streaming because, some of us aren't rewatching things constantly. I got other things to do, like run a podcast and do some film curation and maybe, I don't know, fight crime and monsters. Wait, did I say that out loud? Ow! Oh, the headaches. I'll be fine, okay? Just let me grab some of I'll just grab some of the aspirin that we have in the back room. It's right next to all of your beer. Fine. Don't rant at me about how you don't do that anymore. Jeez. All right. It's still, you used it for hangovers. We know what you used it for. I'm just saying. Anyway, so and then the episode proper picks up right where we left off, which I really appreciated. And it leads with Kong, who was teased at the end of the last season, and immediately we get some Kong. And this was one of just the general observations that I made about this season, or at least this episode. They clearly have a bigger budget this time around. And again, listen to feedback. There are a lot more monsters, which means there's a lot more special effects in this. Because boy, we get a lot of Kong in this, and we get a lot of other monsters. So clearly, they understand what people are looking for in the show, and they are giving it to us. So again, much appreciated. And in this modern Hollywood landscape, the fact that they seem to be listening, it's an excellent thing. Also, I'd like to point out that I'm kind of wondering, and this is another kind of general observation, if season 1 had a lot of tie-ins and follow-ups with Godzilla 2014, I'm wondering if this one is meant to do the same thing, but for Kong Skull Island, because there's a lot of that here. I mean, the most obvious part being that it's set on Skull Island. And this is in, I believe it's supposed to be 2017 canonically in the show, which means it's still before King of the Monsters. And there's name drops about the base that we see at the beginning here. I thought it was a Monarch base. It's not. It's actually Apex. So a GVK tie-in right there. And, well, Walter Simmons gets, is it Walter Simmons? Pretty sure it's Walter Simmons. I might correct myself later. Gets name dropped in this. So I'm wondering, we might see him. I'm also wondering if Apex may be serving as a bit of an antagonist here. But as I was saying, Kong is actually angry and is stepping on people, probably by accident, but he's stepping on people. So it's like, wow, we're going back to his more of his characterization in Skull Island, where he's a little more willy-nilly, a lot less careful, which I think is interesting. And, so we have this big attack. Our heroes are barely avoiding all of this stuff. Kong's attack and all of that, and just the overall shock of now they're back on the surface and it's present day. Well, and in some cases for them, it's a couple years in the future. And then we get to the intro, and I did like the theme song for the show. We have new opening graphics. Here's the thing, though, and this is just the world we live in now. Maybe I have a mild case of, well, this will give it away, AI psychosis, but I did wonder if these cool new graphics for the intro were AI generated. I'm still wondering. Even if they are, I don't know if that would change my opinions of them, but I did like them. I feel like there's a lot of symbolism going on in there, and they're presenting us both Kong and Godzilla. So we're getting a bit of a duality there, even though Godzilla gets mentioned and he's in, like I said, he's in the recap, but I don't think he gets mentioned all that much, at least not directly. So I'm curious. I'm wondering if maybe they're going to save him until toward the end of the season, maybe for the last episode, and focus a lot on Kong, which I actually would prefer. All right. And then we have Keiko waking up, and the lens seems to be narrowing in. She gets up, defies the doctors, rips equipment off of her. And I did like the fact that it's kind of giving us a peek into what's going on for her. And she does meet up with her son, who's Kate's dad. And they have a little moment where it's like, yeah, look, here we are on Outpost 18, which is basically a G.I. Joe battleship, which I thought was really cool. So, calms her down, takes her back in to work with the doctors again. And this was at the point where I wrote in my notes that my money says Old Shaw returns at the end of the episode, but I thought that would mean that we wouldn't see him until the end of the episode. However, we do see him, but I was right in saying, spoiler warning, that he does return by the end of the episode. And I kind of did wonder if it was done that way, as we only lost him at the end of the season finale. So I'm wondering if they were hedging their bets to see if they could get Kurt Russell back, and when they knew they were going to get him back, they either wrote or rewrote this script to reflect that, so they could make sure they got him back into the show, because Kurt Russell was a big get for this show, and I do think that having him and his son Wyatt playing the same character is quite the boon for this show, as I've said before. And let's see. The Apex base. Yeah. And so I'm wondering if they'll be the villains. Yeah, I brought that up. And then we get our first flashback to southern Chile in 1957. And it opens up with our flashback characters, Randa, Keiko, Yang Shaw, and I think there's one other character. I can't remember. His name is escaping me at the moment. Let me double check the wiki, because, I'm just going to toss this out with as minimal editing as possible. Let's see. Keiko, Shaw, and Bill. Yeah, Bill Randa. Okay. So they go to Chile, and they have this a conversation while riding a boat on the river, and they name drop Paul Gassari, which made me happy. Now, they're talking about the actual myth and not any of the movies, but still, you can't throw that name around with kaiju fans without them thinking that. All right. And let's see. And now this was at a point where we're going to this village so they could do an investigation, and it's where I can't remember if it's this one. It is this one. So they arrive at this village, and they have what looks to be a blood-caked fountain, altar, or whatever, and they're like, well, maybe that's where they clean their fish. Foreshadowing. And it was at this point that I started wondering, was the thing that Shaw was trying to warn everybody about in the last season, is it not Ghidorah, and it is in fact who is apparently going to be our villain, quote unquote, for this season, Titan X? A very 90s sort of title. I mean, not title, but name, which makes it slightly lame because it's not a great 90s naming convention, but whatever. So I wonder if it's Titan X who's trying to warn everybody out, not Ghidorah. Who knows? But the way that this episode played out, I'm starting to wonder, and I'm really also starting to wonder if, well, I'll explain it more as we progress through this. So we go back to the present. And you got Kentaro, who's spent the last 2 years working with Apex to get his sister back, and I'm wondering if that's going to end up being a Faustian bargain, given the fact that Cora, yes, I'm going to use her real name, because that's what they're calling her now, that she also got a bit of an offer, shall we say, later on from an Apex, not official, but an Apex agent. I'm wondering if, we got some Faustian bargains going on around here. And then it was not too long after this that we do see that Shaw is in fact alive. It's confirmed. He did not die at the end of the last season. He just got dropped back into the Axis Mundi. And I wonder, one thing I noticed with this is I do wonder how much time has passed. Now, mind you, they rescue him by the end of the episode. So it's been maybe a day, maybe two for our present day, for our heroes on the surface, I should say. So I don't know if that means that it was only a few minutes for Shaw. I can't quite tell. But that time dilation rule is something that hopefully they maintain. But I don't know if they're going to be going back to Axis Mundi after this episode, because it looks like they got problems by the end of this episode. Mild spoilers again. Looks like they have a ton of problems to deal with on Skull Island. All right. So, going back to my notes. So, we also find out this is an interesting idea that if you spend too much time in Axis Mundi and you come back to Earth, it's like a diver coming to the surface too fast. So basically you get the bends, and that I actually like that idea. I think that makes sense. That's a cool idea. And that's why Keiko wasn't feeling well at the start. And there is a line dropped by one of these Apex agents. It says, Apex is learning how to live with the Titans. And I wrote in my notes, you mean building a giant killer robot? Because, I know things. Yeah, Jimmy. Yeah. Coexisting with kaiju can be achieved through giant metal fists. Yeah. How's that reconstruction of Mechanical Mark II going? Okay, fine. I won't bring it up. Jeez, work in progress. I get it. All right. Jeez. Calm down, man. Switch to decaf. Or start drinking again or something. Man, I'm just on fire today. Jeez, just going after him. All right. Jeez, I'm in a mood. All right. And then I mentioned Cora gets the Faustian bargain. Walter Simmons, I was correct. His name dropped. All right. And then Cora goes out and she's trying to buy time for Verdugo, the dad, and Emiko to sneak off to the island so that they can open a portal to get Shaw back. And conveniently, she only has to distract one guy, because despite all the people who are in that control room, only one person's looking at the security monitor. Okay, dude. How convenient. How convenient. But after that, we see them flying through on, what was the name of a Zodiac. They went to the island in a Zodiac, which actually sounds really cool. I don't know why it's called a Zodiac, but it's called a Zodiac. So here they are coming into the island, and it looks straight out of Kong Skull Island from 2017. And I'm wondering, I was wondering, did they go back to where they filmed Skull Island in Vietnam and do more of these? My guess would be they probably did these establishing shots at the same location. But once they actually get on the island, it looks like they filmed this in a nice forest in, I'm guessing, California. I could be wrong on that, because I know they filmed this show all over the world. But it definitely didn't look quite like the Vietnam forest from that, from Skull Island. I could be wrong on that. I might find out between now and then with a little bit of research that I was wrong about that. We'll see. But shout out to Damon Noyes, our executive producer, and the king of the patrons at this point, Patron Supreme. I forget what title we were giving him for that. The Patron Prime. That's what he can be. There are giant crabs on the island. We saw them. Maybe one of them was Hular, because apparently he's on the board now. Go listen to the episode that he sponsored on Attack of the Crab Monsters and watch that movie in case you need any explanations for that. But you guys are the most hardcore bunch of fans that I have, so of course you've listened to that episode. What am I saying? I know. I should have more faith in my fans like that, especially the ones paying me money every month. All right. Because, I need to supplement what the pittance that the board gives me anyway. All right. So we get introduced to another new monster. Now, I'm going to go double check Wikizilla here because they have the list of monsters here. Let's see. And maybe I should check to see, are there any new cast members I really need to be concerned about? Doesn't look like it. We have some guest stars here. Yeah. I don't know if they're going to be regulars or not. So let's see. The Leaf Wing. The Leaf Wing. Yeah, we did see the Leaf Wing from Skull Island. That came back. Mantle Claw. That's the crab. The Mantle Claw. There you go. And this is its first. No, its first appearance was actually in Monarch episode 1. Okay. Guess I kind of forgot about that. And then we had the Bramble Bear, which we had before. Oh, Bramble Boar, excuse me, which we had before. And there's a scene later on, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, where this is an Exus Mundi monster. It looks like basically a giant boar with a bunch of sticks and grass on its back. And it looks like old Shaw, Kurt Russell, is going to go full tilt badass and kill the thing with his tiny knife, but then it gets scared away by a new portal. Spoiler warning. And then there's something here called the Vine Rat. I'm not sure exactly what that is. I know that I saw some stuff popping up online about people liking the Vine Rat, but I don't. I'm guessing that was probably the not what the creature in my notes I called the not Battle Cat. He-Man reference, I know. Well, we'll definitely be coming back to that because I wrote down a funny meme for that one. And then we have the Psycho Vulture, which I think, is that okay. Is that the one with the electric jaws? I think that's the one with the electric jaws would be my guess. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It was previously in MonsterVerse comic books. Its first appearance was actually in Skull Island, The Birth of Kong. And it was also, I think it was in video games. It says a video game. It doesn't say which one. Let me see. What did it appear in? Kingdom. No, that's another comic book. Kingdom Kong. Yeah. And The Hunted. That's as a taxidermy, but okay. Oh, and it was in Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong number 2, number 1. Yeah. So this is its on-screen debut, which is a cool little factoid. And we'll be getting to that thing here shortly. All right, but it does show up, and it's nuts. It grabs another monster by the neck and breaks its neck. But it doesn't eat him. I thought it was doing that to hunt him, but I guess no, it was just defending his territory, and they went and found a smaller critter and ate that. All right, let me go back to 1957. We're at a bar in Chile, and for a second I thought there'd be a bar fight. There was no bar fight. There was, however, dancing. Because Lucia, a local woman, a waitress, comes over and drags Bill Rando away to go dance with him, and Keiko gave her permission, which was, that was a pretty funny scene. And it allowed for the plot to stop and for a character moment to interrupt it, where Old Shaw and Keiko have a nice little heart-to-heart and, talk about some things, get some character development in there. And, a couple of lines I wrote down from that conversation because I thought they would probably be thematic. I mean, this is called Cause and Effect, and, because this is dealing with the, stuff happening in people's past that caused them to do something else. So, that's the cause. And then here's the effect of that cause, people, what influences people's decisions. And Shaw mentions, while they're talking that, the army teaches you no battle plan, survives the first shot. And Keiko asks, why does it have to be a battle? And Shaw says, feels like anything worth having always is, right? It's a nice little sentiment. I like that one. I've been astonished at how well written this show is, considering to use the internet vernacular, the absolute state of Hollywood at this point. I know this is not the show to rant master about that. Got it. All right. And then we go back to the present. We get what I thought was one of my favorite set pieces in this entire episode, where we have Sleeping Kong. We had Sleeping Godzilla before. Now we have Sleeping Kong. And I wrote down in my notes, Sleeping Kong coming to a Funko Pop shelf near you. And I said that because there is now a Funko Pop of Sleeping Godzilla, which I do believe was from GXK. And then our heroes are trying to sneak past him to get to where the pod that they use to go to Axis Mundi is. And then we get this Godzilla 98 moment where it looks for a second like Emiko is about to get squished accidentally by Kong. Go figure, Kong can kill people in his sleep. But thankfully, lucky her, his hand hits the ground and she's in the gap between his fingers. So it's a lot like Animal from Godzilla 98 when he was between Zilla's toes. I can talk, I swear. So I thought that was pretty cool there. And then we do cut back to Outpost 18, and Keiko makes this remark while talking with, what is that guy's name? I'm going to have to look it up because he shows up a lot in this, so I got to remember people's names here. Let's see, recurring. Randa. Let's see. Mari. Okay. Tim. So she's talking to Tim, and he calls her doctor out of respect, obviously, and she makes this remark. This just shows how her time displacement here, that she's worked her whole life to be called doctor, and says that, well, I guess that means the world has changed for the better. And I took that as a bit of a subtle progressivism comment, but it is a reasonable thing to say. I know my history. But, again, I thought it was pretty solid writing here. It's acknowledging something, that is a fact, because even I thought, it's like, how the heck did a Japanese woman in the 50s manage to pull this off? And I think the whole idea was that she was supposed to be exceptional, and still managed to basically muscle her way through and make it happen. But still, it's quite extraordinary. Still wonder if there's a little bit of ignorance on the part of the writers there, but, oh well on that. All right. And, they're making Keiko sound really important, but, given that she's nowhere to be seen in any of the movies that take place after this, here's another one of my season predictions, or maybe it'll be more related to the series, because who knows if she makes it through the season, but I wouldn't be surprised if she either dies or in some form or another just quits Monarch, just leaves. Goes to, live off in the wilderness or something with Shaw or something, even though it seems like she still has feelings for Shaw, even though he's at least 20 years older. I mean, I get it. It's Kurt Russell. No one would blame you, but still. All right. And then we find out, because of her observations, that Kong was not attacking the Apex base directly. He was going after a swarm of other monsters, and maybe those are the vine rats. I don't know. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Anyways, he was going after them because Keiko noticed them on the security footage. And I wrote my notes, and this became prescient very quickly. I wrote that these things remind me of the Chakras from Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla 98 if you prefer. And like I said, we'll get back to that. So we go back to 1957 again. And now Randa and Lucia are dancing. And as usual, I'm such a snob because I take ballroom dance lessons. Yes, there's a dance teacher here on the island. It's not as weird as you think. You have your hobbies. I have mine. Okay. Anyway. But yes, it's made me a snob because I'm not impressed with their dancing, because they're basically just doing a slightly fancier version of what I like to call the middle school sway, where they're barely doing anything. But it allows them to have a conversation where Lucia says something about how the locals have a religion centered around something. And it's at this point, because I did read the plot synopsis for episode 2, and it mentions something about a cult. So this confirms, yes, we're dealing with a cult here, but that was set up, like I mentioned before, with some of the stuff we saw earlier with the fountain or altar or whatever you want to call it. And now I really am wondering, because I made the joke that Titan X was Cthulhu, and then Ryan the Omniviewer Collins wisely pointed out that it's less Cthulhu and more Dagon. And now I really am starting to wonder if this show is deciding to get a little Lovecraftian, and if Titan X will actually turn out to be Dagon, who in old mythology was usually depicted. It's a complicated thing, depending on which sources you look at, but he's been traditionally portrayed as a fish god. And then Lovecraft, H.P. Lovecraft latched on to that and used it as the name of one of the deep ones, a very powerful deep one in several of his stories, most notably Dagon, title character in that, title monster, I guess you could say. And then in, I think it's Shadow over Innsmouth, at the very least. I just read all of H.P. Lovecraft's material just recently. So it's kind of fresh. So anyway, let's move on. Let's see. I need to confirm this, but I made this joke that the guy who's playing Kate's dad in this is Bargain Bin Ken Watanabe. Seriously, he looks like Ken Watanabe. I think I brought that up in the when I did the coverage for season 1, but now I really need to know. Let me see.
A few moments later.
There we go. Nope. Takahiro Hira. All right. So is he? No, he is not, it seems, related to Ken Watanabe, but boy, does he look like Ken Watanabe. All right. Back to the notes. So, Emiko, not Emiko. It's Kate. What am I doing? Why did I put Emiko? Maybe that's what he calls her. But Kate calls out her dad about having a second family. They're working on getting the portal machine put together. So it's a good time to let characters just chat while they're working on stuff. And he says Kentaro's mother worked for Monarch, so he didn't have to lie to her. Whereas with her mother, he didn't feel like he could be himself. And then she asks how he could love two people at the same time, and he says, you don't decide to love two people at the same time. While I appreciate the moral stance that Kate takes, I do find Dad's statement to be a bit dubious. Attraction, maybe you can't entirely control that, but love, you can. Love is a choice. Yes, I know. I'm sounding like Reverend Mafune. All right, fine. We'll just move on. I won't preach. I'm not that good at it anyway. All right, 1957. The waitress startles our heroes in 1957, reveals that she knows something, says she'll take them somewhere. Then we cut back to the present again. I do feel like the flashbacks, at least in this episode, are shorter. There's a larger percentage of time spent in the quote-unquote present compared to the past in this episode. And then we get to a point in the episode where Kentaro and I believe, let me double check. I'm pretty sure it is Cora. I want to say it's Cora. Or May. That was, quote-unquote her other name. All right, let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Cora. It's Kentaro and Cora. I want to say that. Could be wrong on that. But Kentaro is definitely there. They have a little conversation about some, character stuff while they're working, they're trying to take care of some stuff at a facility on the island, and then they get attacked by what I'm assuming is not the vine rat. No, that's did I say? I said that the vine rat might be those insect creatures, which is probably very wrong. So it's the vine rat's probably I said before, it's probably the not battle cat thing. So that starts sneaking around. We get a little bit of a Jurassic Park thing with them hiding and it sneaking around. And then it happens. They startle to try to get away. They go running. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Cora now. Or May, whatever. Cora May. We'll call her that. And, they're trying to get away, trying to, hinder it with some, whatever they can find. And then our boy, Kentaro, finds the best weapon to take out a monster. So, are you ready, Jimmy? All right. Say it with me now. He tried to kill me with a forklift. In this case, he actually succeeded. Kentaro stabs this thing with the prongs of a forklift. You're welcome, Misties. So it was not tried, it was actually succeeding. We had a successful murder with a forklift. Wow. Whew. All right. And then this is where we, had the scene with, old Shaw is going to take out the bramble boar with his knife, but it ends up being a moot point because it gets scared away, like I said. Back to 1957, we're taken to a cave and we get a Monsterverse trademark cave paintings. It was slideshows for a while. Now it's cave paintings, but slideshows have kind of gone away, but the cave paintings have not. So now we have a cave painting showing presumably tight necks and the influence that it was exerting on an ancient Chilean culture. And I'm trying to I'm wondering if I think I may have misheard it. I tried interesting feature that Apple TV Plus has now, where if you do the thing where you back it up 10 seconds to see something, it will turn the subtitles on for that 10 seconds for whatever reason. I guess because they think people missed lines, so they want to be able to hear it. Okay. Interesting feature. But unfortunately, it didn't subtitle the Spanish for me. But I think, I could be wrong, correct me if I am, but I'm pretty sure Lucia, when she was showing them all this, called the monster El Grandios del Mal. I wondered if it might have been Del Mar. Mal would make more sense because if I remember my Spanish from college correctly, mal is one word that can be translated a couple different ways, but one way that it can be translated is evil. So grandiose, that's kind of a loan word in English now, so grandiose. So it's basically, if I'm interpreting this correctly, it's the great the great evil. Yeah, because it's using mal like a noun. Rough translation. I'm assuming I heard her correctly, but again, kind of lending to the theory that this is supposed to be a creature in the vein of H.P. Lovecraft, at the very least perceived that way. All right, which might also account for maybe the Faustian bargains are meant to be kind of parallels. I know I'm putting my English major hat on here, so forgive me. All right, and then this is when Kate makes, because I know this from the trailers, this is where her hubris comes in, and she makes a grave mistake trying to save Shaw. She's told that they need to run but she turns the portal on anyway. And Shaw comes through because the portal magically sucks the pod up, because I forget if there was something special about the pod that just made it magnetized to this energy or whatever. But it also brings Tight Necks through. We see Tight Necks wake up and head for the portal. So apparently it's been waiting for an opportunity to escape, and now it's taking this opportunity. Why it didn't do it before, I don't know. But now it's taking this opportunity. Well, I know why it didn't take it before. Nobody had thought of this monster yet. There you go. It's the real reason. But I do appreciate the fact that we don't really get a good look at Titan X until it does go through the portal. We don't get a full shot of it. And even the full shot we get after it goes through the portal is not a great one. And while this is all going on, one of those smaller monsters, those not Chakaruses, manages to get into the pod. And after tussling with Kurt Russell, aka Old Shaw, in the thing for a little bit, and he stabs it a couple of times with his knife, which I felt like was an homage to the Chakarus, except in that case it got killed with a cleaver. But no, because this is Kurt Russell and, frickin' Snake Plissken here, and we're not going to stop at him just stabbing this thing. No. And even this not Chakarus is like, you think a stab wound is going to stop me? Even a couple of them is going to stop me? No. You got to try harder there, Kurt Russell. And then Kurt Russell says, hold my beer, and rips this thing in half. One word, badass. What? Seriously? You got roped into a Chakarus wrestling ring once? I don't believe it. You're trying to tell me you did this? Something similar. Whatever, dude. You know what? If that's going on the island, you might want to let Director Gordon know so he can shut it down, because that's all kinds of illegal. All right. Back to the show. Thank you. All right. And then when this is all said and done, everybody's back, but the portal's still open. Kong has woken up, because he woke up when they turned the portal on, when they opened it. And Kong ain't happy because, once again, people are mucking around in his house. And he doesn't like it when people muck around in his house. So he shows up and smashes, because Kong loves smashing things in this episode, and he smashes the portal machine, shuts off the portal. Unfortunately, it's a little too late to stop Titan X. Titan X is already here. They also start at least imply that Verdugo is gone, and I'm like, did I miss the part where she died? I'm really confused about that. Seriously, because I guess she wasn't on the helicopter, and I keep looking at this. I keep looking at scarabs. They're calling them scarabs in Wikipedia. Okay, yeah, okay. It says that the Titan X kills Verdugo. I guess I must have missed that part. Silly me. All right. No more Verdugo. She wasn't that great anyway. Wasn't a great person, I should say. All right. And then we get to the end of the episode, and I gotta say, we got our heroes flying in a helicopter, presumably to go back to Outpost 18. And I love the fact that you have Kong trying to chase Titan X, but he gets out into the ocean before Kong can catch him, and Kong can't swim that well, so he stops when the water gets up to about his knees, I think, maybe his waist. But he looks up at our protagonists and gives them two, not just one, but two dirty looks. Oh my gosh. Woo! Ooh, he's not happy with them. He is definitely not happy with them. And then that's the end of the episode. So I can already tell you, this is far more compelling than most of season 1. I had a great time with this. It feels like the present day stuff has finally caught up with them. There's a much more immediate things to take care of for the present day characters. They're not just going on some sort of like pseudo video game quest plot, trying to unravel a mystery box and find things and blah, blah, blah. No. We have a clear and present problem to take care of on Skull Island. And then they solve one and then cause another one. So I'm into it. I'm more into it than I would have thought I would be. So bring on some more. That's what I say. All right. Thanks very much for joining me, Patreon, MIFV Max, I should say. So for those of you who are listening to this later on in the compilation, be sure to check out MIFV Max using the links in the show notes or on our website, monsterislandfilmvault.com. where you can join for as little as $3 a month and get bonus material like this, or at the very least, early access to it. All right. See you for episode 2, which is called Resonance. Hello, MIFV Max, and later on, the Kaiju Lovers. You could have heard this a heck of a lot sooner, immediately after the episode was dropped on Apple TV Plus, by simply joining MIFV Max on Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Shameless self-promotion is now done. Hey, don't get on my case, all right? It's what I do. Spiritual gift and all of that. Anyway, I'm Nate Marchand, the host and curator of the Monster Island Film Vault. And what I probably should have led with is that this is part of MIFV's coverage exclusively on Patreon at first, like I said, to the MIFV Max members of Monarch Season 2. We're going to be discussing Episode 2, Resonance. So, as my friend Luke Giaconetti would say on the Earth Destruction Directive podcast, let's get right into the notes. All right. So, except that's a bit of a lie. I need to, give you a little bit of information here first. So, our director is Lawrence Tilling, who also directed last week's episode, and our screenwriter is Dan Dworkin for this one. Let's see what else has Mr. Dworkin worked on. Oh, he co-created the show Matador, along with Robert Orsi and for Robert Rodriguez for the El Rey Network. Ooh, that would actually make sense. We got some Spanish speaking going on in here. Let's see what else has he done. He's written for Revenge, The Event, Cold Case, Criminal Minds, and American Horror Story, 1984, and the 9th season of the FX horror anthology series American Horror. Yeah, so the normal American Horror Story. So he's got experience with crime drama and horror shows. Makes sense. All right. Seems like he would be a good fit for this. Okay. So, let's get into this, shall we? All right. Let me find my notes here. Switch back over. Totally professional podcaster. All right. So, we start where the previous episode left off, with basically the same scene, but from a slightly different angle with Angry Kong. And this is the only time we're going to see Kong for the entire episode. And I found myself wondering, who's doing the mocap here for Kong? Because I'm wondering if it's the guy from GVK, because I've met him at G-Fest. I'm going to look him up here really quick on the... see if I can find him on the Wikizilla page. The weird thing is he was on GXK, but nobody credited him or said anything about that, and everyone thought it was keyframed when it wasn't. So I'm trying to see. Let's see, is that the correct? Yeah, MonsterVerse Kong. So I just want to see, does it actually list? I'm not seeing any. All right, let's try. Let me scroll down here. Trivia. Yeah, this is such great podcasting. I'm trying to vamp really hard here so I don't have to do any editing. I know, I'm being a bit lazy. Sue me later. All right, let me do a Control F here. I just wish I could remember the guy's name. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Alan Henry. Alan Henry. It only listened for GXK. And are you kidding me? It was a different guy according to the according to Wikizilla. Eric Peaty for GVK. I'm really confused because I'm pretty sure Mr. Henry did it did it for GXK. Did it for both GXK and GVK. Well, I want to know if he did it. Maybe I should have read the credits. I should try. You know what? I think I'm going to do that next week. If Kong is in the episode, I'm going to look through it and see if they credit the mocap actors and see if it really was Alan Henry, because that would be really cool if it was. But the animation looks extremely similar to the movie, so that's why I'm assuming it must be more mocap. Anyway, divergence aside. All right. Now, here's what's funny. I just made this funny little observation during the cold open that Monarch, like every other super spy / evil organization ever, they put the branding on everything. You know, in this case, it was on the copter, it's on the landing pad, it's on the side of the ship, even though they're supposed to be a secret organization. Although probably not so much at this point in the history of the Monsterverse. But hilariously, old Shaw, Kurt Russell, calls this out later and says, well, geez, you put the branding on everything. And it's like the show read my mind. It's hilarious. Hilarious. All right. So just a few things that I didn't bring up last week. For the credits, I noticed that Michael Dougherty is listed as I think it was a consulting producer, or at very least consultant. And I'm wondering how much involvement that actually was. He wasn't the only one who was listed as a consultant. But I know that there was a time where they wanted Michael Dougherty to basically be the Kevin Feige of the Monsterverse, and it didn't work out. I'm mildly disappointed with that, because if there's a guy I would like to be that, it would be him. And then this seems almost ceremonial at this point, but Thomas Tull keeps getting listed as a producer as well, even though he hasn't been with Legendary for years. So it feels more honorific than anything else. But they did the same thing with Yoshimitsu Banno for a minute there, even though they were putting his name on these movies, even though he had died in the midst of all of that. Not long after 2014, if I remember correctly. So I wonder if it's only because that first wave of Monsterverse movies, that he had at least some involvement with it in the pre-planning stage. I'm not sure. But anyway, moving on. I'm trying to understand the geography of this, because apparently Titan X can swim fast. Unless I just don't remember exactly where Skull Island is in the Monsterverse, because I'm guessing it's it's got to be in the Pacific someplace, but they're talking about Titan X swimming in the South China Sea. If I remember my geography correctly, and you know what, just so Jimmy doesn't have to do it, I'm going to check live here. But they said that Titan X is in the South China Sea, which is north of Japan and between Japan and China. Yeah. Basically. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. West by the Indonesia Peninsula, near Taiwan, Philippines. Okay, maybe it's not quite. Trying to get a good look at that. Okay, so maybe it's not north of Japan. I was a little off on that. So I guess it's a little more believable than I thought. But I just thought geographically, I was like, this thing can swim fast, which I'm cool with. Titan X and and all of that. I can tell you there has been talk, because the board is nuts, about bringing Titan X to the island. And I have very mixed feelings about that, to say the least. Of course you do too. I should start a petition. Maybe this should be the one monster we don't bring here. It seems like more trouble than he's worth. Anyway. All right. So there was an actor in here. He had a bit part. He's one of the Monarch guys, and he was talking with Tim, and I swear he looks familiar. I tried looking up a cast list for Monarch online, and I couldn't find anything that shed any light on that. That might be a thing, one of the couple of things I might look into between now and next week. And we have a great line here during this scene from Shaw, who's trying to get a handle on the situation. He says, "We don't have time for bureaucracy," said everybody under the age of 30 in Shin Godzilla. I know, most people at this point would say that. All right. And then I do like the fact that what we're doing here, because we did have that unceremonious death of Verdugo last week. And now, only now, is the Monarch Twitter page, I should say, actually acknowledging that. It's like, well, it took you long enough. But now it's an opportunity for us to throw Tim in charge when he doesn't really want to be, probably not even qualified. It's really only because of rank that he's got this title now, which I think is a really good arc for him. It's a good situation to put him in. Some good character writing here, show. Nice work. And, not Tim, Shaw calls it out a little bit later where, he says like, hey, some men have greatness thrust upon them. It's a nice old phrase. I forget who said that. I'm going to look that up as well. Let's see. Greatness. I should have looked this up beforehand. Thrust upon them. I'm saving you the trouble, Jimmy. Let's see. Some were born great. Some have. Some achieve greatness. What are you talking about? Oh, well, maybe it's a model. What? Is it a Shakespeare thing? Looks like it's a Shakespeare thing. It's just a modified version of it. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. There we go. Oh, it's from Twelfth Night. It's Shakespeare. I subtly love it more and realize that I need to work a little bit harder toward my goal of seeing and or reading all of Shakespeare's material because he's one of my favorite writers. I know it's a very basic response, but anyway. I don't need any lip from you. Okay? At least I have literary tastes, unlike you. Okay, highly presumptive on my part. Jeez. You seem like a man of science to me, and I am a man of letters. Okay, don't get me with the technicality that letters are used in science. All right, anyway, we're moving on. Yeah, science fiction exists. All right, fine, whatever. Moving on. Your life is science fiction. Okay, fine. So is my life. All right, anyway. Bumping the mic. Sorry. Get frazzled here. Jeez. This is what happens when you come to record a little show like this during the kind of off hours at KIJU. What can I say? All right. Anyway. Oh, and I forgot to, this is when I wrote the notes, I forgot to mention that the quote-unquote cliffhanger, so to speak, for the cold open is one of the scarabs, that's the official name, I looked it up, stowed away. It's not the one that got ripped in half, but there was another one, must be his buddy, stowed away on the helicopter. So there's our little B plot. We've got a tiny monster running around on the ship. All right. And then, skipping ahead a little bit here, we have a little scene here with Kentaro, Kate, and Kentaro's dad. Well, their dad. Where Kentaro and his dad are having this little argument about whose fault this whole thing is. And he's thinking that it's theirs or that it's, implicitly Kate's. And dad's trying to say, no, it's not. Well, that, yeah, they shouldn't have hit the button and things like that. But when Kate overhears this and thinks that basically that they're talking about her, he goes to talk to her and he starts being a little duplicitous and he says not to blame herself for it and tries to say that it's vicariously his fault because she came out there because of him. This is weird logic. This is very weird logic. And I think I get what he's trying to do. He's trying to help her feel better and take all the blame for himself, but it doesn't work. It's like by that logic, and I know this might seem like a bit of a strange analogy, that would be like saying that because the victim of a murder did something to motivate the murderer to do it, it's not the murderer's fault, it's the victim's fault. See what I'm getting at here? I still don't quite buy it. It works fine for this story, but in actuality, it's a stupid idea. It's a really, really stupid idea. But we'll move on. And then right after this, we have this Monarch rando who literally bumps into Kate, says sorry, starts wandering around. And then I just wrote my notes. This rando is bug food. And the spoiler warning, he was. In true horror movie fashion, I'm just too genre savvy. He wanders away to to a room by himself. No one else is around. And the scarab finds him. Camera cuts to 1957. We're done. So we get to this part, and there's this quick scene in 1957, because again, the flashbacks feel a little shorter this season, and they also feel a bit more focused. It seems like we're staying in 1957 as opposed to jumping around like it was a Tarantino movie last season with these flashbacks, which I actually appreciate. It makes it a little less confusing, a little easier to follow. All right, so we have young Shaw and Emiko, who is Kentaro's mother. No, it is grandmother, I should say. Correction, grandmother. And Randa. And they're talking about how the waters are actually being enriched, which is an interesting fact. But the thing that confuses me slightly, unless this is something that's going to be explained later, is they said those because it started off with Randa examining the Monsterverse trademark of cave paintings, and they said, "Oh, that tracks this, El Grandios del Mar. It tracks its entire worldwide migratory route. Like to know how they would be able to do that, but." It might be part of the Lovecraftianness of this season, because boy, howdy, we cranked it up a bit here in this episode. Might be part of that. I don't know. And then there's this tension where they're arguing. We have this character moment wrapped inside of plot stuff, which is pretty clever. It's good writing here, where they're all arguing over whether or not they should all leave together to go check on this, or if they should split up. And Randa's bringing, I should say Emiko's bringing up, it's like, hey, I follow every crazy whim you have, but as soon as I have an idea and I want to investigate it, you're not supportive, and blah, blah, blah. There's tension between them and between all of them. And Shaw tries to say, hey, I think we should all stick together. And no, we shouldn't. It's like, there's all this back and forth, obviously showing that there's some trouble in paradise here. And so, long story short, Randa decides to leave to go look into some other stuff, and Emiko stays with Shaw on this island to continue her investigation. Playing into the love triangle a bit there. Then we come back, and we have the scene where Tim, where Shaw tells Tim that, the whole having greatness thrust upon them, and Tim says, that there would be consequences for what Shaw is doing. He should be arrested, but he's like, oh, the message came through garbled. So he's taking a stand for Shaw, because obviously Tim knows he needs Shaw because he's in over his head at this point. Again, smart writing. And this was from the previous scene, but I remember to write the note here. But they mentioned that G-Day was, according to Shaw, was Monarch's greatest failure. That's an interesting statement. I do appreciate the fact how this show is giving us consequences for Godzilla 2014. I think that's been one of the best things about Monarch, is showing those consequences, because it's easier to do that in something like this compared to the movies, even though the movies do get into a little bit of that as well. But this is, again, evidence that this show definitely feels like it's taking greater inspiration, at least tonally, from 2014, and I would argue Skull Island to a lesser extent. The Skull Island movie, not the I can't talk suddenly. the awful pseudo anime from Netflix. Don't get me started. Annie is the worst character in the Monsterverse. I will accept no arguments. Anyway. I know. Got a serious hate, you know what, about her. No, I would never date her, you weirdo. When two people hate each other, it doesn't mean that they secretly like each other. Also, I've never met Annie, nor do I ever want to meet Annie. So how can she hate me? This is a one-sided hate anyway. All right. So, this was at a point where, there's a scene between Kate and May, and I've just realized May hasn't really had much of a presence these last couple of episodes. And I find that a little bit strange. I'm just wondering, could they not find anything for her to do? I hope she's not just loitering around on the ship this season, that they give her something to do. I mean, she wasn't my favorite character ever on the show, but honestly, that goes to old Shaw. And my second favorite is young Shaw. So basically, I just love Shaw in this, but it's Kurt Russell. And so what can you do against that? But she hasn't really done a whole lot. And she has a scene here with Kate trying to help her feel better. And I wrote down, it's like, I hope they don't write off Kate's guilt for opening the portal. Because this should be her the driving force for her, the source of her motivation for the season. This is her going on a redemption arc to make up for her mistake. And judging by the description for next week's episode, that's going to be a part of it. But again, I don't want it written off a third of the way through the season. It just shouldn't be that easy. Okay. Also, there were some other things I saw on the socials related to next week's episode. Oh boy, is it stupid. Anyway, I'll get into it once I'm finished here. Now, this is an example of a few little things that they're scattering throughout. My friend Ryan Collins, the Omni viewer, complained that he didn't feel like Emiko, they did enough with Emiko to show that she's an anachronism here, that she's lost a bunch of time and shouldn't be acclimating as quickly. There's some little things here and there where she's like, what? They do that now? And this one was, she's having a conversation with old Shaw, and he mentioned something about how Monarch is no different than any other government organization, like the IRS and the people who go through your luggage at the airport. And she's like, people go through your luggage at the airport? And I'm thinking, did they not do that in the 1950s? That's a little strange to me, but I wasn't alive back then, obviously. And so I don't know. What about you, Jimmy? Was it like that in the 1950s? Okay, fine. You were barely around, supposedly. You don't want to talk about it. Okay. I have theories about your wacky backstory, sir. Anyway. So I'm still not convinced you don't know what anything about the 1950s. I'm just waiting for something insane like you are secretly your own father. Okay, I won't bring that up again. My gosh. So, going back to the notes. We find out what was originally Randa's mission statement. I don't remember this from season 1, but it's been a hot minute since I've seen it. The mission statement of Monarch, which is discovery and defense in a time of monsters, which I like. And Emiko goes into this little speech to everybody that, long story short, she says that they tried defense at the Bikini Atoll, which was the attempted bombing of Godzilla disguised as a test from season 1, and they learned that the best defense is discovery. Interesting. So you find the monsters, understand them, and figure out how to respond to them then, as opposed to just trying to kill them. Makes sense. I like that. Trying to remind everybody is like, this is what Monarch is for. Because she's concerned, and I think rightfully so, that maybe Monarch has lost a little bit of track of that. So that's nice. So we go back to 1957. And we have this scene in a cave where some science is being scienced, and young Shaw and Emiko have a little scene together, and they have a nice conversation. And we find out some interesting backstory for Emiko. And I think I brought this up in season 1. Forgive me, I think I did kind of misremember that Emiko is her name and not Kate's name. And I think I brought this up in season 1 in my coverage then because I wondered about this, which was, is Emiko, at least in name, an homage to Godzilla 54? And now I think we have even more evidence that she is in some way an homage to Godzilla 54, because we find out that she was put in an arranged marriage. So, which we knew about, she had a son named Yoshi, which was a revelation in season 1. We find out Yoshi's father was a doctor during and after the war, and he lived in Nagasaki. And without saying it, because the next thing she says is that he died of cancer. So you put 2 and 2 together there, and Emiko, in a very Japanese sort of way, is saying, my husband died because of the nuclear bombing. That intrigues me. I really like that. It's some excellent writing there. Now, unfortunately, this conversation ends a little bit confused because she's talking about how Randa, there are only 2 things that Randa cares about more than Monarch. Namely, her and Shaw, because best friends. But she punctuates that by saying that he also believes that Emiko can be her own person no matter the circumstances. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, because they're supposed to be in a relationship. So what does he mean by her own person? It's just bizarre to me. Is he trying to minimize their relationship or something? I don't understand that. Maybe help me out here, MIFE Max, and later on, the kaiju lovers. Help me pick up what they're putting down here. All right. Write in, leave comments, whatever. Give me some insight here, because I don't quite get it. Now, then the scene ends kind of funny with her using a stethoscope to listen to vibrations on the ground. And but Shaw doesn't hear or feel them, which is and some more kind of implicit Lovecraftian stuff here, because we get some more related to this in the quote-unquote present, which I will get to in a moment. And then we cut very quickly back to the present, where through the application of science, we find out that Titanex responds to subsonic sound, stuff that humans can't hear, but they can feel it. And I'm like, well, that hardly makes it godlike if it can be easily, not maneuvered, manipulated like that. But probably spoke a little too soon, as the rest of the episode shows me. Back to 1957. And we have Lucia and I guess we could say like a village leader who definitely seems to be shady. And he comes here. Now, there are other points where the Spanish is subtitled, and I'm paying as much attention as I can because I took Spanish for a few years in school, and I'm trying to see how much of it I can still remember, understand, and I'm catching some of it. But they come in and they talk to young Shaw and Emiko, and they slip into Spanish a little bit there, and I didn't catch it, which frustrates me a little bit. But even if I back it up, and even if it's a thing where they'll say a bit of Spanish while they're speaking English, if I back it up and try to do this little trick that Apple TV Plus has, where if you back it up a little bit, it will subtitle any lines you may have missed, which is a nice quality of life feature. all it says is speak Spanish. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Because it's operating under the idea that if you're not, you're supposed to be like the characters. The characters don't understand the Spanish, so you as the audience are not supposed to understand the Spanish unless you already understand Spanish. So it's mildly frustrating because I'm like, I feel like something got dropped there. And if I know the Spanish, I feel like there's, well, if I know it better, I should say, there's some hidden meaning there. So I'm a little annoyed. Like I said, it makes me wish I knew my Spanish better. Because I will say, like, right now, I'm on Okasawara, so my fun language to learn would be Japanese. The more practical language that I would like to learn is Spanish because it's widely spoken, especially back home in America. Yeah, you would think I would have picked up on the Japanese more after working here for years, but, don't judge me. Anyway. So they mentioned that, hey, we're going to have a festival tonight. And I wrote down, oh, they're going to be human sacrifices so they can get more fish because the fish god is supposed to bless them with great fishing. I was sort of right on that, as you'll find out here. All right, and then we cut back to the present, and I'm like, wow, this little critter's leaving a heck of a blood trail. What did he do to that guy? And we don't find out what happened to that poor Monarch dude. I don't know if he just got mauled and the scarab left. I don't know if the scarab magically ate him, which would be preposterous because he's kind of tiny compared to him. So I don't know what happened there, but no one ever talks about it. It's like, oh, we found a body. But there is still plenty of blood being left around. And so I'm guessing the scarab was able to drag a lot of him around. And then we also have this nice little scene where Emiko is talking to Kentaro's dad. And it's because it's her son, basically. And she's, they're trying to do some plot stuff. And he tries to bite his nails. She's like, no, don't bite your nails. And then she catches herself and she's like, oh, yeah, my son is my age, if not a little older than me now. And I still can't stop being his mother. It's endearing. I like it. And he doesn't seem to be very happy with that, because dude's carrying a lot of guilt and shame, as he should. All right. And then we have a nice little line here from Old Shaw. This is one of the things that just makes me like Old Shaw as much as I do, because Emiko is marveling at the drones that they have and what amazing technology it is. And he's like, yeah, the toys are cool, but they can't top experience and instinct. It's like, that's a very Old Shaw thing to say. Yep. And it's at this point where Kate discovers the scarab running around in the ship, calls it in, says, I need help. And I'm just like, well, what are you worried about? Just get Shaw down there and he'll rip it in half, which would have been amazing. But I guess we don't want to overdo that. And then, hilariously, Kate goes from being a scared little girl when she finds it and calls it in to grabbing a fire extinguisher and turning into a lady badass. Flip of a switch. Wow. And then we have the scene where they're trying to use the drone with a subsonic frequency to see if they can divert Titan X from going to a section of the ocean where there is a bunch of civilian sailors and boats. And they use the drone to do it, and the guy operating the drone doesn't want to get too close. And then Shaw just, because otherwise it'll, the water will splash up and crash the drone. And Shaw just says, screw it, and hits the controls because obviously Old Shaw's more willing to take risks. And then it backfires, and they lose the drone. And everybody looks at him like, we told you. He's a little embarrassed. Right? So it's a nice contrast, but I appreciate the fact that he doesn't just automatically win. And there are consequences. All right. And then we go back to Kate, who's still trying to confront the scarab with the fire extinguisher. And the thing goes after her, and magically the fire extinguisher conveniently is jammed. But then Kentaro and, who was it? It was Kentaro. Was it May? I think it was. Yeah, I think it was Kentaro and May. Could be wrong. Yeah, correct me later. They come down there, and Kentaro shoots it with a flare gun. Not my first choice in weapon, but, it was effective. And May makes a little comment. It's like, wow, your aim's better. Yeah. And, it shoots it twice and still doesn't die. And then we find out this thing can scream really loud, unless those are effects were more for show than to be taken literally, because I'm like, how does something that tiny scream that loud? And it's that makes Tight Next turn around to come get that, which now I'm sitting here trying to figure out, are the scarabs Tight Next's offspring? Or is it a symbiotic relationship sort of a thing here? This is already reminding me a lot of the Chakarases. So I'm wondering if it's something a little bit like that. I'm not entirely sure. It's probably something that will get explained later, I hope. But I'm going with either offspring or symbiotic relationship. More so symbiotic relationship, because I don't know how the scarabs could possibly be this thing's offspring. But, I was going to make a joke about how fire extinguisher, my one weakness. And it was more like flare guns, my one weakness. And I wrote in my notes, was like, is this when Godzilla is supposed to show up? No, it isn't. Which is probably better. Save him for later. We go back to 1957 in what might be the most interesting scene. It does get split up a little bit, but most interesting scene in the flashback. And we get a translation. I was off. I was way off last week. I did mishear it. It wasn't El Grandios del Mal. It was El Grandios del Mar. So I was slightly off, like I said. But the Spanish character, the Chilean? Yes. The Chilean characters do. Yes. Not Argentine. It's Chilean. They do translate it for us. And they say that the name means the great god of the sea. I stand corrected. But they're putting on all this black face paint over their eyes and face and stuff like that. I'm like, guys, I know they're saying this is just the tradition that they use as an excuse for revelry, but this should be a dead giveaway that something's not good here. And, then there's like, here's some wine. I said, the wine's poisoned, which was true. And I thought it was so that they could drug them and use them as human sacrifices for El Grandios del Mar, but not quite. And then I thought for a second, because Emiko responds to it first, I thought only hers was drugged, and she starts it's hallucinating. So I'm guessing it's at least a mild hallucinogenic. But then as the scene progresses, I was starting to wonder if Shaw's was drugged as well. It just took longer. I mean, he's a bigger guy, and the bigger you are, the longer it takes for a drug to take effect. And as I pointed out last season, the actress playing Emiko is freakishly tiny. She probably weighs 100 pounds soaking wet. All right, that's how tiny she is. So just remind myself, her name, the actress's name, Kyoko Kudo. All right, just want to make sure, minding my P's and Q's there. All right, so they get involved in the revelry, and we have this mildly hallucinogenic scene where it seems like their inhibitions are coming down. They flash back to when they shared a kiss in season 1. And, you think for a second it's going to happen again. And it's just emphasizing that they do that they too are also in love, to remind you of the love triangle. And then that all gets interrupted because you hear some stomping. And I thought for a second, this was excellent filmmaking. I thought for a second this was an approaching kaiju. I thought Titan X was coming. And I'm like, but it doesn't sound loud enough. And then I was correct. It wasn't, but this very scary looking witch doctor dude, or priest would probably be more accurate, comes in wearing a very scary looking fish headdress And again, and he has a knife, and I thought, oh crap, he's here to sacrifice them. But no, they come in carting a gigantic fish. Like, we're talking the size of a small shark. All right? About the size of a horse. It's massive. I thought at first it was fake, but it's very quickly confirmed it is not, because they hang it over the altar, and the priest guy takes a knife and cuts it open and lets the blood drain out. So like, oh, wow. They were right last week. It is fish blood. It's not human blood. I thought we were setting up the fact that there were, that it was a human sacrifice thing. Okay. It's not. Nice subversion, I suppose. But they also take the blood and smear it on their foreheads. Or at least we see Lucia with blood smeared on her forehead. And for a second, I thought, it was like, what is this concept? Is that they put the blood on them and then they turn savage? Which would be interesting. But the scene cuts, so I don't know. And spoiler warning, because I didn't write this until we went back to 1957, to the next 1957 flashback. I don't think it's that. I think it's more of a dark take on perhaps Passover, and perhaps more apropos, Ash Wednesday. I'm not Catholic, but I know what happens on Ash Wednesday. But it seems like, instead of ashes being smeared on the forehead, in this case, it's this fish blood. And, it's this basically a fish god. Again, I'm telling you, Titan X is Dagon. Until I'm told otherwise, I'm operating under the idea that this is Dagon. Titanus Dagon, calling it now. So, it seems like the idea, as we see in the next scene, is that having this fish blood on your forehead somehow protects you. That's why I say it's like a dark version of Passover. Because if you understand that, well, darker version, I suppose. I don't know. Depends on how you want to look at it. For those who aren't familiar with Passover, if you've seen the Ten Commandments, you've seen or the Prince of Egypt for that matter, you've seen a dramatization of this. But when the Pharaoh continued to refuse to let Israel go, despite the insistence of Moses and all the 9 plagues at that point, he refused one last time. So the Israelites sacrificed lambs and then took the blood of those lambs, brushed it on their doors, above their doors, and then the angel of death came into Egypt, and all the firstborns at any house that hadn't been marked with that blood died. So that's the long and short of it. Back to the quote-unquote present. I'm thinking, okay, throw the bug overboard. That sounds smart. But what ends up happening, instead of just shooting it out of a torpedo, I thought it was going to be shot out of a torpedo tube. It wasn't. It was put on a boat and then drove the boat out there. And I'm like, why? They never really explain why. Because I'm like, did the engines not work? Why not just jettison it? Throw it out in the water. Does Shaw have a death wish? I don't think it looked like, no, he doesn't have a death wish. He's just, it's big dang hero time. As a, certain hero on the island likes to say. I know things. All right? I know things. No, my name is not Lois. Anyway. So, yeah, I was a little confused by that because they don't explain it. Maybe the idea is that the ship is not fast enough to outrun it. And Shaw is going to go out there on the smaller boat because it's faster and more maneuverable. I don't know. Would have liked him to have actually said something. Otherwise, it seemed a little suspect, a little strange. Like it was done simply to have a cool action sequence, which we'll be getting to. Well, actually, no, I think no, that was later. But there is the scene that is a callback, I think, to what we were seeing earlier in the episode in the flashback, where Kate is standing there looking out the launch bay for the boat, And then she gets called away. And before that, she was saying, it's like, don't you guys hear that? And everyone said no. And then she leaves. And the spot where she was standing, there was some water in there. And we see ripples coming from where she was standing to the two of them where her feet were, but she's not there. So I'm starting to think that Titan X is able to create some sort of a connection with certain people. In Kate's case, I'm guessing it's because she released him, but I don't know why it would do that for Emiko. So unless this is a family lineage thing, which is a little strange because Emiko is not her mother. So I'm a little confused. Again, I'm sure this is something that will be explained later. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. But, I'm just operating off of what I have right now. And I just watched the episode, so I haven't necessarily had a ton of time to process everything. All right. So now we go back to 1957. Like I said, people don't turn savage. But they said, but to keep our secret, it looks like they're just going to leave them. And I thought Titan X was coming. It ends up being a bunch of the scarabs. And that's when I started making all the connections to, Dark Passover and all that. I'll explain what was actually happening because it was a nice little subversion. But we go back, we're cutting between the present and the past a lot here. Go back to the present. And we have this entire action sequence where Titan X is trying to chase down Shaw in the boat. And I think it is absolutely undeniable that this entire sequence was inspired by -1. Because I don't know how it couldn't be. The shots are similar. The situation is similar. This is straight up -1. And you know what? I'm here for it. Once again, if you're going to copy something, copy the best. I would prefer that you do it competently, which I would argue they do here, even though the setup and motivation for this is a little dubious. But Shaw, throws the bug overboard and then dodges a massive wave in the wake of Titan X, which was pretty cool. I thought for a second he was going to, get shipwrecked basically, and then they would have to go fish him out of the water. That doesn't happen because he's Kurt Russell and he's too cool for that. And then we go back to 1957, and we have, I noted that when the scarabs are coming, we have a faster version of the theme song playing as, for this action sequence, which I thought was really cool. I think that's all it was that it was sped up. I don't know if it was a different recording or anything. And that's the thing. I thought it would be Titan X, but it's a swarm of scarabs. Well, no, I already brought that up. So I thought it was going after them, but they're not the target. Titan X is coming out in the water off the shoreline. That's where they're going. So I'm wondering, so they weren't trying to feed them to the scarabs. They are offering it to Titan X, but why are the scarabs coming? Why are they going to Titan X? I have questions. Unless the idea here is that, because in the trailer they mentioned that the sea life worships Titan X. Unless the concept here is that these little scarabs are like its cabal of followers or something weird like that. I don't know. And then in an interesting choice, our cliffhanger is here in the flashback, which is hardly a cliffhanger because we know from season 1 that they survived this. So it's a cliffhanger based on how are they going to get out of it? I guess they just wanted to end on a monster appearance. So cool for them, I guess. But it's still a little strange that was the choice. But regardless, that was our episode. It was a great follow-up, I feel like. We're moving some of the character stuff along, integrating it into the plot elements pretty well. I do have questions about what's going on, which is probably a good thing. I'm just hoping that the season sticks the landing, but because inspiring questions like this in your audience is good, but you better dang well pay it off and make it worthwhile. I'm also curious to see how they will apparently spread this out over 10 episodes. And I'm also wondering how we're going to get Godzilla involved and things like that, But this is part of the fun, and I'm always going to say this. Netflix has been the ruin of a lot of things, which is why I'm very happy that Paramount still beat them in trying to buy out Warner Brothers, the much lesser of two evils. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, better them than the board. But I don't even know if they have enough money to do that. That would be insane if they did. But anyway, like I said, I'm happy so far. But what I was trying to say is doing these weekly releases is far better than dropping everything in one day, because it gives people time to go online, go to work or whatever, and talk about these things in these interims. I think it creates far more fan engagement than dropping it all on a Friday and then everybody watches the 10 episodes in a weekend. And then they have to wait 3 years for another season, looking at you, Stranger Things, and then be disappointed. Again, looking at you, Stranger Things. I know. I'm full of what's the phrase? The spit and vinegar, not spit and vinegar, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to next week. Next week's episode is titled, let me bring it up here really quick. It's called Secrets. All right. And I've already seen a few people freaking out online because the content warning on Apple TV Plus says sex scenes. And people are being kind of ridiculous about that. It's like, oh no, Godzilla fans are going to freak out because there's human sexuality in the franchise. What the heck? And then other people are like, oh, it means the kaiju are going to bang. Oh, good Lord, that's even worse. And it was like, oh, lesbian sex, here it comes. Really? We're going to bring that back up? Anyway. I did not need to know that. But I guess we'll find out what happens next week. I will offer my opinion then. If I had to put forward a theory, I'm going to say it's Young Shaw and Emiko. But it sounds like, and it was about this time, I think in season 1, where they reveal that Kate is lesbian, if not bisexual. And that created a short-lived controversy in the fandom. I'm wondering if this is what they're doing, if this is their quote-unquote controversy of the season with this one. Throw in a sex scene to throw everybody off because we're not used to seeing that in our Godzilla media. Like I said, we'll find out. It's not like they, didn't have a full-fledged makeout session in Godzilla 2014 as if to make up for the fact that there was barely any kissing in the entire franchise. Yes, I know. The one, the most noteworthy kiss of the rare kisses, I should say, involved your favorite Toho actress and your spirit animal. Get a room. Hello, MIFV Max on Patreon and later the Kaiju Lovers. So, it's time to get into Monarch Season 2, Episode 3. And honestly, I would only call it a doozy because of the controversies that were drummed up about it online. Thank you, Godzilla fandom, for making all of us look like fools. I'll get into it. All right. Now, first off, because I always try to start these off talking about the writer and director, I don't have any information, at least immediately here, on the screenwriter whose name is Kari, K-A-R-I, Drake. Let me see. I'm going to do a on-the-fly Google search here. Let's see, who is this? Oh, she's kind of pretty, at least. Oh, she worked on Severance, Lost in Space, Tales of the Walking Dead. Now she works in storyboarding. Okay. So she's done a lot. All right. thank you, Google, for letting me know about that. So it's a high caliber writer there, theoretically. I haven't seen Severance, but I hear it's good. But Hiromi Kamada, I recognize that immediately as a Japanese name, obviously. And I'm bringing it up now because there's a dedication at the end of the episode when the credits starts for Tomomi Kamada. And I wasn't sure who that was, so I looked it up, and thank you to Bam. What is this? Bam Smack Pow. Interesting name for this little website. I might have to frequent this a little more. But it had this nice little article that explained what this was. So long story short, Tomomi Kamada is Hiromi Kamada's father, and he was a Japanese cinematographer who worked in the Mexican film industry. This was interesting. Born in 1949, went to Mexico in the 70s, and got into the film industry there. Worked on things like, and I will admit I don't know what any of these are. Maybe my friend Sergio will know a thing or two about it. I don't know if they're podcast worthy, Jimmy, but I'm sure if I dug around enough, I could find some stuff from there that would be podcast worthy. Anyway, worked on stuff like La Illegale, Le Cumbare. I got to roll the R, so it's La Cumbare, The Dark Palace, Run, Kane, Gertrudis, Detai, and a short film called La Noche de Mateo. La Noche, so that's Matthew's milk? Noche? I believe that's leche. So the Matthew's night, I think Noche? I think Noche is night. Let me double check to make sure, because if I don't, Jimmy will. Let's believe it is. Come on, just make it. Yes, night. I was right. All right. Anyway, so she directed the episode, so she dedicated it to him, which I thought was nice of her. And his daughters worked on a fair amount of stuff as well. Stuff like, what is it? Showtime's Let the Right One In, Freeform's Cruel Summer, FX's Shogun. That makes sense. And the third season of Netflix's The Night Agent. Netflix has a show that made it to a third season. What? And it's not Stranger Things? What? This does not compute. Oh, now you're embracing that your wife used to be part of a computer. Oh, it short-circuited her, I'm sure. Okay. Well, anyway, his daughter has had an interest in cinema thanks to her, although she originally wanted to be in law, from what I'm reading in this article. Ironically, because she grew up watching 12 Angry Men. And, then she became a summer intern at his production company and got into film instead. So there you go. You're welcome, MIFE Max and kaiju lovers. Now, let's get into the episode proper. Well, okay, I do have one more thing to bring up. I think I brought this up the last time, but I'll bring it up again. No, Lee Shaw is not related to my pseudo-sister. She chose that name because it was my great-grandmother's maiden name. No, grandmother's. My grandmother's maiden name. My great-grandmother. There you go. All right. So the flashback picks up in 1957, obviously, because that's where last week's cliffhanger was. And the monsters are going to barely be in this. In fact, most of the monster footage that you're going to see in this episode is stock footage, flashbacks to previous episodes. Most of the monster footage you're going to get in this, that's new anyway, is going to be in this first scene with Titan X. And he barely does anything. He, she, whatever. It barely does anything. It just leaves after briefly coming ashore, and all the scarabs follow it. I still don't know if the scarabs are its offspring or whatever. I did observe that Titan X's horns changed from reddish, because it almost looks like the hot pink or lavender or whatever that the powered up Godzilla had in GXK, but it went from reddish to blue. So from warm color to cool color. So basically, Titan X's horns are mood rings. You know, I didn't need to hear that, Jimmy. I don't believe that you actually invented a mood ring that actually works. Because if you did, all the fellas would be paying you all kinds of money. You'd be a millionaire. You wouldn't be working here. Oh, you like it too much. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. That's just casting more doubt on you. Anyway, also, I have to issue a retraction. I'm such an idiot. I must have misread something. This is very much unlike me. You think I would have remembered this from the previous episodes that I covered in season 1 and even this season, but it's not Emiko, it's Keiko. I got it very, very wrong this entire time. Yeah, Jimmy, you slacked off there. You didn't do your job. Oh, it's one of those times you just like watching me make a fool of myself. Oh my gosh, it's season 1 of MIFV all over again. Don't get nostalgic on me, all right? Can you really be nostalgic for something that was only a few years ago? Anyway, the apology, an apology with the retraction has been issued. You can stop laughing at me. I think I would have remembered that because, you know, there's a character from Star Trek named Keiko, but we're moving on. Anyway, then all the villagers accost Shaw and Keiko afterward, and they want to stop them from they want to take the camera with the pictures that they took and kill them as well, just to make sure that their secret doesn't get out. So clearly their expectation that Titan X would kill them did not happen. But there's this untranslated word that was in there. It was kokai, and it's actually spelled, it was in the subtitles for the Spanish, and it was spelled CO-KAI. You know what? I am going to do some live research about that. You should have done this for me, Jimmy. Oh, I need more work. Sure. Comicbook.com is claiming that Titan X's name is Kokai, and it's Kokai with a single quote, an apostrophe. Huh. Is that what is that official? Let's see what might have not been updated yet, but let's see what Wikizilla has to say about that. It still says Titan X here. Yeah, it still says, alternate name, it has it as Kokai. So I'm sticking with Titan X until I'm told otherwise. Still not convinced that it isn't Dagon. All right, I'm sticking with my Dagon theory. Anyway, after our credits, wherein I forgot that the other logo that we see in here is the Apex logo, which will be relevant this time around because Apex is asserting itself a lot more as the antagonist this time around, which is interesting. So we have a corporation versus a government organization, the private sector versus the public sector, the secret public sector. Anyway, I did have this one line at the start here, and it's probably colored by the fact that I went into this waiting for the infamous sex scene to happen. So some of these early comments are colored by that expectation. So you have this meeting between Cora and Kate, and yes, I'm going to keep calling her Cora, and they're talking. Kate's saying that she's just going to go back to America, that it's not good for her to be there. She has to do what's best for her, and he tries to get her to do the same thing. And Cora says, "You don't know what's best for me." And I thought for a second that meant she was going to suddenly become lesbian, and that there was attraction there. And turns out that's definitely not the case. Well, I shouldn't say definitely, but it's not the case in this right here. Has nothing to do with attraction. Has to do with other things. And then Hiroshi, that's Kentaro's dad, he mentions that he conveniently has another machine that they can use to lure tight necks around. It's a prototype, but they have to go to his office in Tokyo to get it. The old prototype trope. Gotta love it. And then that's when Tim goes back to I guess you could say the bridge of Outpost 18. And there are all these Apex operatives basically taking over. And he's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, we're in charge now. He's like, what are you talking about? And there's this great line about them upgrading their equipment. And he's like, yeah, it's like putting a Ferrari engine in a Pinto, which my dad's a car guy, so that made me laugh. So they're trying to take over, at least for this operation, this mission, which is predictable. And then we find out it's because they basically have Monarch at their mercy because they provided them with all the technology that they have. Right. And this came about when Tim has a conversation with, I wish I could remember this guy's name, but it's this black guy that everyone jokes about how he's supposed to be in charge of Monarch, but this guy's barely in anything in in the Monsterverse. And I'm trying to see if I can find his name here. I believe it was Lance Reddick here. It can't be that actor because Mr. Reddick died in 2023. But I do wonder if it is the character who is Guillermin. I'm not 100% sure. His name was not stated during the episode. Regardless, let's get back to the notes. To borrow a phrase once again from Luke Giaconetti of the seemingly defunct Earth Destruction Directive podcast. I miss that show. Anyway, they have that talk and basically decide, okay, I guess we're just going to have to go ahead with this for at least the time being. And, there's this nice callback where I'm assuming it's Guillermin says, I trust that message didn't come through garbled. Nice job. And funny enough, the characters all have a powwow about this, and Old Shaw likes Apex. He must be a conservative. That's what I wrote, because he doesn't like government organizations, even though he used to be part of one. A couple of them, really, if you include the military. But he likes what Apex is doing. I'm assuming he changed his mind later about that. Yep. And then our characters decide that, all right, if we're going to make this happen, we're going to have to go get the machine. So which means we're going to Tokyo. And I had been hearing that the show had been filming all around the world. And when we get here, very obvious, they filmed this in Tokyo proper. This is not a set. It's not green screen. It's on location filmmaking, and I love it. And I'll say that again. I love it. And then I need to change the name here, but it's Keiko. Remarks that the machine is smaller than Suzuki's. Not realizing that, she was around at a time where everyone thought that in order for technology to advance, it would have to get bigger, not smaller. So that would make sense. So that's another little hint at her time displacement here. And then we abruptly go back to 1957, where Keiko and Shaw are trying to get away from the Chileans. And in a weirdly Lord of the Rings moment where they're hiding just over a small ravine not ravine, I guess a hill, to hide from them after they take the film out of the camera and just drop the camera, hoping that will, they'll fall for that, which, spoiler warning, they do. And, they're hiding and they're all leaving, but Lucia is with them and she does catch a glimpse of them, but she lets them go. Now, These two don't know that, but she does let them go, which I find interesting. I don't know if we'll see Lucia again. I'm going to say no, but obviously, whatever was going on here, Lucia was not on board for it, or at least not entirely. She was sympathetic to Shaw and Keiko, so that would make sense. And we cut back to the quote-unquote present, where Tim meets up with Korra, and they concoct a plan, which is basically Korra is going to infiltrate Apex again by claiming that she needs a job desperately. And there's this great line during this exchange where Tim says they're doing a toast to disappointment, the only thing in life that doesn't disappoint. Again, the writing in the show continues to impress me. And then the scene ends with Korra saying the best way to get a job is to have something they need, which is very true, very apropos. Which is why a lot of people my age and younger are having trouble getting jobs. I know that's not my problem right now. Okay, that's enough, Jimmy. All right, moving on. And then Kate, at first I thought this was another flashback. It's not. Kate has gone home to San Francisco, and she meets her mom, and her mom, in the intervening 2 years, has married a white man. Interesting. And they have a conversation trying to catch up. And we get this again. I was very appreciative of this. She talks when they're talking about, it's like, oh man, you've been to Axis Mundi and stared down, and all this stuff. And she says, yeah, there and back again. All right. Thank you for the Lord of the Rings reference. I appreciate that. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, show. Thank you, screenwriter. Thank you. Looking at the name again. Oh, well, I was wrong. It is Ralph Eggleton, who is our writer this time around. Miss Drake wrote last week's episode. So Mr. Eggleton has worked on, what else has he worked on? Oh, he used to be a production designer at Pixar. Assuming this is the same guy. Could be wrong about that. Could be a different Ralph Eggleton, but that's what came up for me looking around. Huh. But anyway, Lord of the Rings reference makes Nate happy. And then we go back over to Tokyo, and Keiko is rummaging through her son's office and discovers all these photographs that have two different women. And that's when she realizes that Kentaro and Kate have two different mothers. He's like, was he married twice? And Shaw won't say anything. He doesn't, he doesn't feel like that was the time or place to do it. Probably wasn't. And she remarks, we all have our secrets, which is the title of the episode. It's the theme. And I thought at first, because it cuts to 1957, that this was supposed to signal the infamous sex scene. Spoiler warning, it doesn't. Now we have Keiko and Shaw. They are hiding in a cabin, and he dresses her wound, keeps telling her that it's pretty bad, because they got into some knife fighting action there to get away from the villagers. And I'm like, are they really going to do it while she's, both of them are wounded, kind of bleeding out? That'd be weird. No? Or is it not yet? That's what I wrote in my notes. It was the latter. And then I just remarked that because at this point we go to Korra and she's in Pensacola. So we're kind of getting back to season 1 where there was a lot of jumping around, whether that be temporally or locationally. I'm not sure if that's a word, but I'm going to go with it because we have characters in different places in the world and characters in different times. Thankfully, it's not quite to the extreme that season 1 was. And I'm kind of hoping that it won't be because I like how this has been more focused the last few episodes. Korra name drops Tight Necks, and I can't remember if this is the first time that he's actually been named. Might be the first. I could be wrong on that. It's a rather unceremonious way to announce your monster's name, but sure. And then we go back to Tokyo, and our characters over there, Keiko, Old Shaw, Kentaro, who hasn't done a whole lot the last couple of episodes, not going to lie. I hope that changes. And who's the last one? Hiroshi. They all meet together. He says, all right, we should split up so we don't get caught. You know, city of a million cameras and all that. And Shaw says, hey, I'll take Kentaro, which is obviously giving Keiko an opportunity to talk to Hiroshi. And long story short, they have a conversation and he confesses that he was two-timing, that he loved two different women. And that, at that point, I'm just like, is it because, is this mean that mom did the same thing? Runs in the family, does it? And spoiler warning, I called it because, as you'll find out here in a moment, because it goes back to 1957, following up on the previous scene. And Shaw falls victim to what I call the tough guy turns into a baby when a pretty woman tends his wounds trope. I'm sure that is on TV tropes somewhere. I'm sure it is because it's a thing. It happens a lot. I don't know what it is. I guess they just feel comfortable enough being a little more vulnerable. And then they get into an argument. And then that suddenly leads to sex. I'm like, what is this? It's arguably two cliches in a row. I'm a little more forgiving of the former, but what is with this thing where, as I swear, tell me if I'm wrong, but do people in real life get into an argument and it just magically ends in sex? I didn't need to know that, Jimmy. Neither did the listeners. That is true. Your mic is still stuck in robot mode. Yeah, because boy howdy, the censors would have had a heyday with that. Just saying. But still, it's such a cliche, and I don't get it. I've never liked it. It doesn't make sense 90+% of the time. And you know what? I didn't hit it when I did a little TikTok video that I put on the YouTubes and the Instagrams and all that, all the socials. I didn't do it before, so I'm going to do it now. Rentmaster activated. What is wrong with this fandom? They have been overblowing this for an entire week. Either acting like children because, oh my gosh, there's a sex scene in my Godzilla stuff. And you get to it, and it's a nothing burger. And then the really immature ones, even more so than just freaking out at the existence of it, the really immature ones were cracking stupid jokes about monsters getting it on, or there being lesbian sex, and all these things, and I was sick of it. I was sick of all of the gatekeeping and the whining and the immature freakouts over all of this. Because this is one of the tamest sex scenes I've ever seen. It is remarkably tasteful. There's no nudity. The characters don't even get don't really even get their shirts off or anything. You just see them making out in bed. The camera is watching from outside of a window, and then the camera just pans to the left, and we basically fade to black. It's basically an artsy fade to black. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That's it? And I was seeing people, before I watched it, going online, as I was busy working today, and they'd already seen the episode, and they were flipping out about it. I'm like, this is so stupid. This is so incredibly stupid. I will give some of them a little bit of slack in this regard. We're talking about a franchise, the Godzilla franchise, that has barely had any kissing, despite the abundance of romances. Not abundance, but the romances that we have had in the franchise. The most kissing we ever got was in Godzilla 2014, where we had a flat-out makeout session that got interrupted. And this is basically on par with that. It's just that it didn't get pardon me for using this term, it didn't get cock blocked by a phone call. The camera just looked away. Yeah. So it was, like I said, it was a giant nothing burger, especially compared to what we're about to get here in a second, because it follows up on one of the big talking points, quote unquote, controversies of season 1. So hold on a second. So Kate decides, instead of meeting with some people that might be able to help her out with the stuff that's going on, she's she's in a taxi. She was going to go to a restaurant and meet them, and she says, "No, I won't go there. Take me somewhere else." So she goes to a club so she can meet one of her very butch, masculine-looking exes. So I'm assuming that Kate is a lesbian and not baseline bi, as some people like to call it. I mean, she hasn't said one way or the other. We've only seen her like girls. All right. So they're hanging out in the club and they get all kissy. So again, last season's controversy. Nobody has said a word, at least as of this recording. Not sure what's going on with that one. Wouldn't put it past them, though. And then, while all the fun at the club gets interrupted by basically, and we have a system like this over here at the island, too. It's basically like a weather advisory, but it's for Titans. It says there's a, what did it call? No, that is wrong. That's not Kate. That is Cora. I wrote it wrong. So Cora, while she's doing her investigating, speaking of a city of a million cameras, she discovers that Apex has been spying on our characters for a while there, and tells, I assume, Tim, that all of this is going on, but his name in her phone is hilariously Goonies too. Nice job. So anyway, yeah, it's a Titan watch. So Monarch, so secretive. Monarch, or wait, was it Apex? I don't remember now. But they issue a warning saying that there might be a Titan that will come ashore, and so people are supposed to, I guess, find shelter or evacuate or whatever. It's nice world building. And the ex leaves, and that disappoints Kate, and they have a bit of a fight over it. And Kate, in a moment of vulnerability, kind of hints at the fact that it's because the video they show is Titan X, and it just reminds Kate that it's all her fault. So, yeah, we come back to 1957. It's the morning after. And I just wrote in my notes, 2 timing runs in the family. Huh, Keiko? Yep. And they have a little bit of a talk about it. And, her and Shaw. And then Belranda finds them in a boat, rescues them, hugs Keiko, and she can barely contain her guilt. Yep. Should have known better. But, makes for good drama, I suppose. And then we go back to 1957, and we have what honestly is one of my favorite shots, not only of this episode, but possibly the whole series, where Kate wanders over to a restricted area, and she sees the Golden Gate Bridge, which still hasn't been repaired. The entire middle section of the bridge is still missing from Godzilla 2014. And it triggers a flashback for her to G-Day and unleashing Titan X. And she basically screams at it in guilt. Nice job, show. Probably my favorite scene of the episode. No, it is my favorite scene of the episode. Great stuff. Nice continuity, nice world building, good character work. And there's basically no dialogue in it too, which is great, which is excellent, and some good editing as well for all the flashback footage. Nice work, great job, love it. All right, back to 1957. Emiko, right? Not Emiko. I kept writing it wrong. Keiko. I'm gonna keep correcting myself. Keiko writes a letter to Shaw, and long story short, tells him that they can't be together. But she loves him. However, her heart, quote, belongs to Billy, end quote. I don't understand what that means. I don't understand. So she loves him, but her heart belongs to Billy. I don't get it. It's the sort of thing. Hiroshi comes by it honestly because he says the same kind of weird stuff about loving two people at the same time. I don't get it. Because I feel like this is something that could only exist in fiction. Whatever. It just sounds very confused. It's just very convoluted and confusing. And maybe it's because I'm not a woman that I don't get it. I don't know. But Hiroshi was doing the same thing, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just not capable of loving that many people at the same time like that. I don't know. But it's a frame of mind I just can't put myself in. Anyway, mini non-rant master over. So I wrote in my notes, Hiroshi has abandonment issues. He thinks Bill Randa abandoned him. And I thought at first he was referring to Randa's death in Kong Skull Island, but that would be too late in the timeline for this. And then we get a different flashback. We go to 1962 and we see little Hiroshi investigating some things and wondering about what's going on and things like that. Because if you remember season 1, this would be shortly after Keiko and Shaw disappeared into Axis Mundi. And this is when Bill Randa basically adopts the guy, the kid. So they have a nice little talk. And then we find out that some of the stuff that he was rummaging through in the attic had the letter that was sent to Shaw. We did see Shaw read it, and he got so upset about it, he started drinking, which is always a great idea. Right, Jimmy? Hey, hashtag triggered. You had it coming. So that was our cliffhanger. Randa finds the letter, just sees Lee's name on it, and thinks about reading it. I'm wondering if he does read it. I'm going to assume he did. And maybe that would explain how in about 10 years he turned into grumpy John Goodman. We'll see, I suppose. We'll see. Speaking of which, they're not doing as good a job as I would have liked in making this actor for Randa look old enough, especially when you think about John Goodman, who was very well aged in Kong Skull Island. Yeah, Anders Holm. All right. Yeah, might want to make him look a little older. Just saying. All right, so there you go. Not a great episode, I would say, especially if you're looking for monster action. It's very much a bridge episode, getting us from one big thing to another. So, hopefully it will pay off next week. Next week's episode. Oh, I can't remember what is next week's episode. Next week's episode is called Trespass. So we'll see, hopefully that will ratchet things up a little bit more. Oh, once again, I was wrong. Mr. Eggleton wrote next week's episode. It was Carrie Drake who wrote this week's episode. I can read. I swear I can read. Yes, stop enjoying my misery, you sadist. Yeah, I know. It takes one to know one. Anyway, like I said, it's probably, other than that one great scene, probably the comparatively the least interesting episode of the season so far, but we'll see how it goes from there. This is definitely not a show for people who don't like human characters in kaiju movies. Can you please get over yourselves? All right. Well, anyway, I'll see you next week, kaiju lovers. And most importantly, I shouldn't say that, but first and foremost, MIFE Max. Hello, MIFE Max, and later on, the kaiju lovers. My apologies. First, let me say hello. It's Nate Marchand, the host and curator of the Monster Island Film Vault, and this is our continuing coverage of Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 2. Tonight we're discussing Episode 4, Trespass. Yes, Jimmy, I was about to get to that. in case you hear any unfortunate background noise, namely thunder, shall we say, no, it's not the Rant Master. There's some nasty weather going through the island right now, and I'm recording this a little after hours. So please bear with us in case there's any unfortunate noise in the background. Who knows what, I don't know, Thor or, I guess in this case it would be Susanoo has in store for us tonight? That's a good question. I've heard rumors that Susanoo was actually here on the island. That is absolutely absurd. Why would he host a horror radio show? I'm just saying. Alrighty, let's get into this, shall we? Tonight we're discussing, like I said, episode 4 of Monarch Legacy Monsters Season 2. Please bear with me. I have been so busy here on the island that it has actually been a couple of days since I've seen the episode, but I've done a little bit of reading up on it to remind myself, and I'm going over my notes like I always do, so hopefully my memory recall will still be pretty sharp despite everything that's happened the last couple of days. And woo boy, I can hear the rain coming down even harder right now. I don't know if you can, MIFE Max and Kaiju lovers, but boy howdy. I'm sure it brings back great memories for you. I didn't know it could rain on Venus. Oh, it was acid. Of course it was acid. All right, let's get into this. Alrighty, so the first thing I'm going to mention here is out of all the episodes that we've had so far, this probably had the least amount of flashback stuff in it. It's really only some bookends with this episode. Also, I neglected to mention, we once again have Hiromi Kamada directing. We talked about her last week. And our writer this week is Al Letson. I had never heard of this guy. So I did a little bit of digging on the Googles, and gotta admit, I don't know why this guy is working on this show. I found his Wikipedia page, and there's nothing here to indicate that he's written anything other than plays and some comics. Most notably, he's done some writing for DC. Well, he did a couple of independent comics called Imperfect and Planetfall. He worked with DC Comics on the second DC. It was a workshop, but he did write a Mr. Terrific comic book called Year One in 2025. He's mostly a radio host. Oh, I can relate, and a podcaster. I can also relate, and he's also apparently a journalist with NPR and stuff like that. Hosts a show called State of Reunion, RE:union, because he's clever like that, I guess. I had to go to his IMDb to confirm that he actually wrote on the show, and it wasn't a different Al Letson. He's also a poet. He does performance poetry. So I really don't understand what the deal, why he's working on this show. FYI, he's also a black man. Just throwing that out there. So, like I said, I don't really understand it. The other screenwriters that I've seen so far in the show, I understand why they would be working on this. I get their credentials. This one, I don't. This one is baffling. I don't even know if did he? Let me check to see if he worked on season 1. Let me double check here. Did he write for season 1? He also, IMDb lists him as a producer? Supervising producer and producer? Okay. I'm confused. Let's see. Okay. He says he wrote 2 episodes. Oh, he wrote 1 season 1 episode, episode 8, Birthright. Okay. Still, I'm a little bit confused. And it also credits him with working on a show called Moonhaven and Horror Noir. Both from 2022 and 2021, respectively. Alrighty. Well, there you go. That's your writer. Like I said, don't know what to do with that. But anyway, let's get back to my notes. All right, so like I was saying, we get the least amount. We get a flashback montage at the beginning that goes. Initially, I thought it was going from 1962 to 1973, and that's sort of true, but it goes all the way to 2015 because it's tracking the history of Keiko's letter to Shaw after it's. Which I'm still not. It's. Let me check the synopsis. Did Lee actually read it? Because I am not sure. Bill continues to research. No, it doesn't say. So we still don't know if, not Lee, if Bill Randa, if he actually read it. We still don't know. But we just see it get basically put in storage, and it bounces around, and we see some clips going from 1962 to 1973, and then it jumps all the way to 2015, and we see it be acquired by Apex by accident. And then we get the opening credits. And I did note, and this is just a problem I've had for a long time when doing stuff like this, but when being a podcaster, having to take notes while watching stuff, it's particularly challenging when it's subtitled. But letting the show play to not miss anything is why I wrote this is why it's not a Netflix show, because this is I actually miss things when I look down to write notes, and I have to look back up. And then it opens up with a couple of surfers who are on American Samoa. It's Ofu Beach. One of them cracks a joke. It's like, oh, Godzilla don't surf, because they think that the Titan that's coming in is Godzilla. Spoiler warning, it's Titan X. That was kind of cute. And one of them is wearing, I'm guessing it's like a body cam, probably because he's going to put it out on the internet. And, so it's kind of sort of first person. It shows them surfing, getting yelled at by the authorities, tell them to get out of there. There's a red flag that's planted as if it's like, this is a Titan warning, and it looks like a silhouette of Godzilla. That's pretty cool. And I wrote that seeing stuff through the surfer's perspective like this is almost found footage. It would be interesting to try a movie like that, but Cloverfield exists, so maybe not. And then Titan X shows up and claims its first victims. It sinks the boat, and presumably, and then the scarabs, I should say, come ashore and get the surfers. Pretty nice, a pretty cool scene. And that's the only monster action you're getting for this entire episode. I was talking with somebody, a coworker actually, here at KIJU about this, and I mentioned that it's a little bit of it's a different pattern than what we had in season 1, but it still feels I've noticed that basically what happened was that we had 2 pretty slam bang episodes with a lot of monster stuff in it. Appearances by Kong, very prominent appearances by Kong. And now that that our heroes have gotten off of Skull Island, the monster stuff has been a lot more minimal. Probably because they're trying to save money on budget, I'm guessing, so that when we have monsters appearing from here on out, it's going to be significant. It's going to have impact. It's just very noticeable, and I guess I would just like to have a little bit more, just a little, please. Not just barely enough to remind us that this is actually supposed to be a monster show. I don't know. I'm kind of of two minds about that, because on one hand, I'm not one of the anti-human characters people, but I do want to see the monsters a little more often. I'm just saying. All right. So let's move on here. So we have this cut, and we see Kate, and I wrote in my notes that I was a little bit confused by this, because it's Kate laying on a beach, and I thought for a second she had been shipwrecked, and that it was like, did I miss an episode somehow or whatever? But really, it's just a clever transition. She's waking up after she's tried to go out and party, and it's basically a beach where at the park where she had her emotional breakdown the night before. And then I just wrote on my notes, because the water comes up to her, and she starts noticing things. She's telepathically linked to Titan X, but it only seems to be when she's touching water. That's an observation I've made. So I have termed it, and I hereby trademark it, even if it's going to be locked behind the Patreon paywall here for a little bit. I'm calling it aquatic telepathy. It's telepathy that only works if the two people involved, or the two beings involved, are both in water. So it's kind of like how Vulcans have tactile telepathy through the mind meld, but they have to actually have physical contact with somebody to do it. Otherwise, they are not telepathic. This one requires water. I don't know how useful that would be. Suppose I could talk to the island scientists and find out how useful that would be, but there you go. So now, of course, Titan X is going to San Francisco. But what I should have known from the get-go, and I had misgivings about this, is unless they decide to kind of do what some of the, we'll say, extraneous, peripheral, Monsterverse materials have done, which is contradict established lore, there's no way that Titan X is going to get to San Francisco because that would have been brought up. That would be a major event to happen in between movies, because this is still set between Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters, which is in 2019. So I know nothing's going to happen. I just don't know how it's not going to happen. There's also, I noted, when Tim is talking with Trisup, that's the Apex guy. I did look his name up. And the Trisup is kind of dressing him down a little bit and making a comment about Titan X weighing 20,000 tons, then that seems remarkably light. But because I know what a lot of the numbers, shall we say, the weight class of monsters like Godzilla, because there are not only official heights but also official weights. And the Showa Godzilla, who I'm assuming is probably smaller than this, is 2.5 times that heavy. I know Godzilla's a big boy, but unless he's just that much denser, not that kind of dense. Yeah, you're my density too. Whatever. But anyway, I just, unless he's denser, I don't know how that weight works. So then Kate gets, we'll say, an accidental pep talk while she's going around. It's a nice little scene. And it's something that did need to happen. It's a little, well, I understand why it had to be this one now that I think about it. So she meets a mother on the street while they're evacuating because they think Titan X is coming. And she meets, and this mother has a son who was in the bus on G-Day. And she says, "You saved my son." And he comes over and he thanks her for doing that. And that motivates her to go make, we find out later, is basically what motivates her to go do something right. Cool. So she's, coming around, getting over herself a little bit. The mother makes a comment about how, because of Kate, her son lived to be a teenager. And I'm going to assume, if that's the case, that her son was probably in middle school. Because, puberty kicked him in the butt hard. That's all I'm going to say. He was very well grown because, I think this is supposed to be 2017, so it's been 3 years. So he grew fast in 3 years. That's all I'm saying. All right. And then we have a scene where Lee and, let me see, they go to a bar, a dive bar, because they're trying to, let's see. Yeah. And we're in Pensacola, Florida. So they're going to steal Hiroshi's Titan lure back from Apex. Is there a thing in here? Say the others infiltrate Apex's headquarters. They don't even explain this whole thing with the bar on Wikipedia. Well, thanks a lot. But they go to a bar because there's an Apex guy there, and they want to put a tracker in something, in some tech that he has. So they go through they concoct this whole plan where Kentaro and Old Shaw go into the bar, and he's like, "Oh, this is my uncle." And I'm looking at this like, is Kurt Russell actually this fat, or are they faking this? So he's pretending to be this, jerk of a drunk, which allows Kentaro, was it? Or is it? No, it wasn't Kentaro. It was supposed to be Kentaro's uncle. Who was it? Because Hiroshi and Keiko were the ones who mucked around with the thing. Maybe it was May. Or Cora. I'm going to say Cora. Maybe it was Cora. Do I have a note about that? Yeah, let me see. He calls him Uncle Bob. I had an Uncle Bob too. Yeah. I was expecting a bar fight. There wasn't a bar fight, but there was a fake heart attack. And I forgot Uncle Bob, quote unquote. It's also kind of racist. Well, not racist, sexist, because, or maybe no. No, I think it's probably a bit of both now that I think about it, because he comes across, I know, I think it, yeah, because he comes across a woman, an ethnic woman, or maybe it was, but like I said, it's been a couple days. And he says, I'll buy you. Oh my gosh, what a line. But anyway, they do the thing. It's kind of suspenseful. And then they leave. And then we cut back to Outpost 18. And we've got Tim and Trissa talking again. Sarazawa gets name dropped. And Tim was trying to argue. It's like, see, Sarazawa was right. And then Trissa replied, was like, yeah, he was right once. That is, again, we're furthering the conflict here. But what I can't figure out at the moment is, what is Apex actually developing? Now, I think the episode explains that, but maybe this is just me, but I keep waiting for them to actually connect this more closely to the movies. So I was like, are they developing the Orca? And I said, no, it's too early for Mechagodzilla. Spoiler warning. Well, we'll get to that because that's a little bit of a revelation in this. So, yeah, and then Kate goes back and sees her biological mother, and she says, hey, I got to go fix the problem that I caused. And her mom is saying, no, you can't. She's being a mom. Kate's possibly being foolish, but I do applaud her for wanting to, seek redemption and a bit of penance. What I don't understand is, what does she actually think she's going to do? That I haven't been able to figure out. Everybody else is military and scientist. What does she think she's going to do? I'm just saying. And then Keiko calls out Hiroshi for not letting Kentaro know that he's proud of him during a later scene where Kentaro goes off to do something while they're, trying to be a little clandestine. So again, we're furthering the family drama that's going on here. And then we go to Apex. And after a long series of events where Korra is trying to hide her true motives, and they're trying to infiltrate this place, they manage to trigger a false alarm over a radiation leak. And I'm like, it's like they know that something like this is going to happen. Should this be some sort of giveaway that Apex is up to no good? I'm just saying, like, unless you're working at some sort of I would think anyway, a nuclear facility, or say here on Monster Island, I don't know. Why do you need to worry about a radiation leak? And it's just a technology firm. Shouldn't that be concerning? Just saying. And then we find out that Apex, this is part of the revelation for what's going on with Apex, and that is they've been smuggling creatures from Skull Island, including some leaf wings, which you've seen before, but now we have a brand new monster. And I have to admit, it's one that I kind of like. They call it a needle walker. Basically, what do they say? It's the love child of a dodo and a hedgehog. It's a pretty wild looking critter. I have a feeling that thanks to their little appearance here, that the board is probably going to send Heat out on an expedition to Skull Island, see if they could bring one or two of them back. Might have to send some of the Ozaki's mutants along with them, just for safety's sake. I don't know if they'll send Mako, our new specialized team, because they've got their hands full keeping the island safe and maintaining order there, with all the monsters. Trust me, I've seen some of it firsthand. Fire-breathing T-Rexes are nothing to sneeze at. We are not talking about how I ended up in a dumpster. Okay? I had to hide somewhere. And I'm leaving it at that. Ow! Headache. Yeah, sure. You go get the aspirin. I'll take it after we're done recording. Ah, dang it. Man. Jeez. All right. Focus, Marchand. Focus. Center. Zen. Yeah, I know. cultural appropriation or whatever. I'm just being culturally insensitive. Get over yourselves. I wrote, because then we have Hiroshi and Keiko in the elevator together for a second. I wrote, yeah, of course, a character moment happens in the elevator because that's a perfect time where nothing is really happening and you can let the characters have that moment and they're bonding as mother and son. It's nice. It's helping to set up the yet another emotional cliffhanger, but we'll get to that. And so Korra is talking with the lady who is like her immediate supervisor at Apex, and she brings up the line, move fast, break things. She said, she says, we want to restore. So she's talking about how Apex, unlike, they're trying to compete with Monarch here. They want to figure out how to live with the Titans. So they're coming up with some way to be able to do that. But for them, coexistence means control, obviously. And this is when we do get the more proper reveal of the Skull Island critters, as I put it. And, there's this interesting little line where I believe it was the Apex lady, and she says, who's to say nature is always right? Which seems like quite the mission statement for Apex, given what we see of them later on in Godzilla vs. Kong. So basically, and this is something, I'm borrowing a bit of a term here from Power Rangers, but they have invented, this is the big revelation, this is the big project that Apex has been working on. They invented what I'm calling compliance collars, which again, like I said, is a term I borrowed from Power Rangers. And apparently, the code that Korra helped develop allowed them to be able to do this. So the long and short of it is the collars isolate aggressive instincts in animals, in particular Titans, because she takes up this little pterodactyl looking bird thing. Let me see. Is there a name for that? I did bring up the Wikizilla page for this to see. Is it a vine strangler? Yeah, I think it is a vine strangler. Or is it a leafwing? No, it's a baby leafwing. That's what it is. It's a baby leafwing, and it's not aggressive. It's just very nice. Just eat some food out of the Apex lady's hand. They have tamed the monsters. And I'm starting to wonder, it's like, does this really make them the bad guys? Because this sounds very handy. Keeping the monsters docile. This actually seems like a good idea, but Apex is supposed to be framed as the bad guys, theoretically. So unless we're just going to take the short-sighted idea that humanity should not be allowed to have control over these animals, which is a very classic thing. We see that happen a lot in the Godzilla films. Looking at you, Terror of Mechagodzilla. That was a theme in that, most notably, because in that case it was humans doing it. But again, how is this supposed to make them nefarious? My guess would be that it doesn't just make them docile, that Apex has other plans for them, because otherwise this is kind of weak motivation to make Apex the bad guys. All right, well, let's move on. So now we have Old Shaw and Kentaro. They're sneaking around. They see the monsters in captivity, and they're like, okay, we need a distraction. We need, which of these do we set free? And they almost set, I'm guessing that was the Vine Strangler, and it looked absolutely horrifying. It looked like it had a mouth in its chest. And then Kentaro says, no, use this one. They're territorial, but not predatory, and it was the Needle Walker. So they free them. But I wrote in my notes, like, dude, you could say the same thing about hippos. Hippos are not predatory. They're herbivores, but they're incredibly aggressive and territorial. And the most dangerous animals in Africa. They kill more people than any other animal species. I'm just saying. But it's TV logic, I suppose. If they're not predatory, they're less aggressive. Doesn't exactly make sense, but okay. And then it's revealed that they got a false positive we go back to Tim on Outpost 18. The Apex people have left at this point under sort of mysterious circumstances, although they're claiming that they're going to go help the Pacific Fleet intercept Titan X. And there's this big tense moment where they're waiting for Titan X to show up. And then it's revealed that it was actually a whale that Apex had mucked around with their technology and given them a false alarm. Okay. Which begs the question, what were they doing? So I wrote, Apex sent them on a wild whale chase. Not my funniest line, but still. I didn't need you to agree with me. All right. Then we did have a brief flashback to what I think is 1963 with young Hiroshi, and it's just a brief conversation he has with with Bill Randa. Yeah. And then we cut back to our group of characters who are still infiltrating the bowels of Apex while Kate is trying to distract her supervisor to not see figure out that this whole thing was a ruse with the alarm, because now they figured out that it was a false alarm, and now people are starting to come back in, so she's trying to buy time for them. Basically the same thing she did a couple episodes ago on the boat. This is the second time. Good Lord, this girl is incredibly good at distracting people. These bad guys are incredibly unobservant. Apex, what is wrong with you? TV logic again, I suppose. But anyway, they managed to get to where Hiroshi's device is being held, and they find it, but it's been completely gutted, and it's useless to them now. But then they figure out that Apex has been able to monitor all of this stuff because they found Randa's complete map of Titan migratory patterns. And we have this nice little montage flashback where we see him exploring the world and figuring out where all this is. And that's how they knew everything. That's how they knew Titan X wasn't going to be there. Cool. All right. Still not sure exactly what's going on here. And then they do manage to escape thanks to the distraction of the Needle Walkers running around wreaking havoc, not killing anybody, but just wreaking some havoc there, being very annoying. Reminds me of when I lived in Fort Wayne, and we went and I would visit the children's zoo, and they would let the peacocks roam free. Now they're not running around yapping at people, you're running around poking people and scaring people. No, not necessarily, but they would run around and they would yell at people, particularly when you're trying to have a moment with your girlfriend. Never did forgive that bird. Sure, I'll see Reverend Mifune about it, and get some much needed therapy, as you say. I'm glad it did wonders for you. Or was it because, I basically kind of broke you on the air via immersion therapy when we did that anniversary live stream talking about the movie that dramatized the most important chapter of your life? All right, man. Gonna make you PTSD about PTSDing. Jeez, PTSD inception over here. My gosh. Ugh. Anyway, so they do manage to escape, and they go back to that dive motel where they were hiding out, and Kate's there. How did Kate know they were there? I don't think they told her. As far as I know, they hadn't communicated with her before then, and the dialogue seems to indicate she just figured out where they were. It's just like, who picked this place? And they all point at old Shaw. Okay. I'm confused on that. So that's a bit of a contrivance, not contrivance, plot convenience. Well, we'll go with plot hole, because seriously, what? How did she? Anyway, and and that's when I wrote. It's like, what exactly is she gonna do? How useful is she gonna be in this endeavor? I mean, season 1 it made sense. She was trying to find her dad, but what's she gonna do? And then we have the emotional cliffhanger. For the second episode in a row, we have an emotional cliffhanger because Hiroshi and Keiko start rummaging through stuff in their vehicle, and Hiroshi finds the letter. And that's how the episode ends. And I'm like, is this really supposed to be a problem? Is that supposed to bother him? I really don't understand why this is the cliffhanger and why she's worried. Is she worried that she's going to come across as a hypocrite? because he ended up doing the very thing that she did. I don't exactly get what's going on here and why this was cliffhanger worthy, because even from an emotional standpoint, I don't see why a revelation like that is going to be all that shocking. At least, maybe not shocking, but why it would bother him. It'd be a surprise for sure, but I don't think this is necessarily going to put their relationship in jeopardy. But I might be proven wrong next week, or rather, as of recording this, tomorrow. But, we'll find out then, won't we? All right. Well, a little shorter than normal. Like I said, it's been a couple of days. It's not quite as fresh in my memory. But there you go. Episode 4. Not by far the least interesting out of the episodes in season 2 so far, I would say, other than the introduction of the Needle Walkers. So not exactly sure what to do with it. I haven't watched friend of the podcast, Ryan the Omnivore Collins's review of this yet, but the thumbnail seems to imply that he thought that this entire episode was pointless. I don't know if it was pointless. They set out some goals, were not able to accomplish those goals, but technically the plot has moved forward. Or maybe the character stories have moved forward, but not necessarily the plot. I think that'd be a better way to put it. They just didn't accomplish what they set out to do. So if you want to say it was a waste for that reason, I could understand. But anyway, I'm curious about the next episode. The title of it, Furusato, actually necessitated me to do a bit of research, and I learned something. I'm amazed after all this time here on Monster Island, Ogasawara, that I haven't heard about this before. But I'm like, that is a Japanese name or word that I've never heard before. What is it? I won't get into too much of it now. I'll save that for the next episode to see how it factors into the episode. But it is a Japanese children's song from 1914. And if you want to know more than that, tune in next time, MIFV Max, and skip ahead, kaiju lovers, if you're listening to this as part of the supercuts that are coming out later.